Few people today realize how much the United States is a creation of Christians. The 98% of the settlers to this country were Protestant Christians fleeing persecution. They created the country, and they created it on Christian principles, actually Protestant Christian principles. Every value that we hold dear, equality, inclusion, freedom, are Christian values. Before the Protestant Reformation, you couldn't get to heaven except by going through the Catholic Church. And the revolutionary idea that the Protestant Reformation came up with was called the priesthood of all believers. So there's no priest class between you and the Creator. That was the fundamental Protestant idea. When you think about it for a second, if everybody is a priest, everybody is equal. And it's this idea that led to the freeing of the slaves, to the equality of women, to all the great advances in our culture. In America, for the last 50 years, there's been a dedicated war against Christianity and against believers by the so-called progressive left. In my lifetime, there's never been a darker hour for America. When I left the radical movement, when I saw that radicalism was a destructive and evil movement, I began to re-examine the foundations of this country. And the first thing that occurred to me was that you can't have inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness unless there's a God, or unless you have respect for people who believe in God. Atheists could not have created this country. It kind of began in 1962 with the Supreme Court decision to remove prayer from the schools. For 170 years, there had been prayer in the schools. But suddenly, without any precedent, the Supreme Court, actually only 6 justices, decided that that was unconstitutional. As a consequence, any child going to a public school cannot be taught. It can't be mentioned that the Pilgrims were actually religious Christians fleeing persecution. We have been stripped of our roots, and that's why you see powerful movements today to suppress free speech coming from the left, racism from the left, dividing our country into categories of skin color and gender and sexual orientation, the very opposite of what the Christian founders of this country believed in. One of the things that I explained in the book is how the left, the so-called progressive, liberal left, is really a religion. It's a religious cult. Actually, it's an old Christian heresy, the left is, named after Pelagius, a Christian monk who lived in the 4th century. And Pelagius believed that sin was against human nature. And therefore, if Christians would just be good Christians, if they would just follow their true nature as human beings, they could create the kingdom of heaven on earth without a divine intervention. Pelagius' antagonist was St. Augustine, who believed in original sin, that sin is part of our nature. It's not against our nature. It's the sin of pride that every leftist has inside them, and the belief that they could create a new world where there's social justice, peace, and there's paradise on earth. It's about perfection. So just as Pelagius believed that if you were true to your nature, you would be a good Christian because sin was against nature, modern progressives believe that if you are politically correct, or if the government can force you to be politically correct, you can create paradise on earth. This is the most dangerous and destructive idea in the history of the human race. It's the idea that we confront today, and it's why I've called this book The War to Destroy Christian America. The most important freedom we have, it actually begins with religious liberty, is freedom of conscience. If they delegitimize your conscience and silence you so that you can't speak, you can't defend any of your freedoms. The whole basis of our freedoms as Americans is, first of all, this religious liberty, the liberty of conscience. There's no more important fight than defending the freedom of people to disagree with you. The left is at war with people who disagree with them. The left has declared war on Christianity, and the Christians are on the front line. And it's a very, very dangerous moment in our political history.